I'm Chuck Hayward. I am a television and film writer and producer. Fun little anecdote, Molly Cash, actually from ISA, was able to connect me when she learned that I was writing a remake of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. She was able to connect me with the original writers of the original film. They were kind enough to read my script and give me really, really nice feedback on it, and it made me feel happy because, the last thing you want to do if you're doing a remake is to have the people that wrote the original think that you did a terrible job. So check out the rest of my interview on ISA's Pro Tips.
Hi, my name is Naveed Maklarji. I'm a producer in Hollywood, a former studio executive, and I also teach at USC, which I love, and can do some consulting. I just did a video for ISA, which you can find on their Pro Tips page, and talked a lot about the changing dynamics of the business, what's happening post-COVID, and most importantly, I think for you guys, what we're looking for from writers and the kinds of things that are selling right now, which in a very positive note, as hard as it is to cast, there are a lot of things in different kinds of arenas that are getting made, more and more different genres, more and more different things, including from some voices that hadn't been heard of in the past. And if you want to hear more about it, go see my video on ISA's Pro Tips page. Thanks.
One of the things I've learned in my journey in the past 3 years is no matter how big you are, because I've sat in rooms with really big writers, no matter how big you are, you will get notes. So get comfortable. Because notes are not, because sometimes for us writers, we get very uncomfortable with notes and we feel like notes is a judgment on you and a judgment on your craft. But what I've come to learn is that no, notes is when the first audience, which is the producers who read your material, read it and say, this is the place where I don't understand where the story goes. So take it as your audience telling you, oh, I think you're trying to say something, it's just not clear. And when you do it that way, then you begin to understand that everybody who's working with you is a member of a team. You're all one team. And everybody wants this thing to succeed because let's call a spade a spade. If your show gets picked up, everybody gets paid. If it doesn't, nobody gets paid. That's the reality of it. So never think that anybody wants you to fail, because that is the complete opposite of what is happening in the room. Everybody wants to succeed, right? So if you play as a team, if you move as a team, it increases your chances of success. And to be honest, also, once you finish a project with a specific group of people and you go your separate ways, guess what you have done? You have created allies so that now, when you are looking for work, now you have people who are going to come back to you. And that's what networking really is figuring out and showing other people that you can work as part of a team. Now, for the rest of my interview, feel free to go watch it at Emerging Screenwriters Interview Series on networkisa.org. I got that right. Okay, take care.
Hi, my name's Dessa Larkin-Boutte. One piece of advice I would give is to not miss out on life while pursuing your career. The people that are in my wheelhouse are people that I genuinely love and admire. And so when I see that something is going well for them, it's usually, hey, read this article, congrats, right? Like there's no favors asked, there's no nothing. It's just, I am genuinely letting you know that I am so proud and so like amped for you. Great job, right? So I think you can support someone without needing something back from them, right? I think so. The first step is just genuinely admiring and genuinely supporting. And then, last year I made the choice when Westworld ended not to pursue another assisting job in the industry. And part of that was financial. Part of that was just like, my soul was just tired. I just needed a break from all of it.
Right.
So I took a job non-industry where I've been for this past year just to kind of pay the bills while I continue to develop. But I did go on kind of like a press tour. So like I called up everyone in my Rolodex and just had a quick Zoom. I was like, hey, I am leaving temporarily, but just so you know, I'm still around. And these are the things I'm working on. And I would love to, if you hear of something or working on something, I'm definitely still available, even if I'm not actively in the industry per se right now. So I think it's, sometimes there's very much the direct route of I'm still here. Keep me in mind, which definitely works when timed correctly. You can see the rest of my interview on the Emerging Screenwriter interview series.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. How is everybody? Some people are writing in the chat. Thank you so much. You are here for ISA Presents The Path to Getting Staffed with the Writers Guild Foundation. If you are in the wrong place, stick around, learn some stuff. We are going to welcome our panelists in, but I'm first going to just do a couple announcements from the ISA side of things. First, we want to thank the Writers Guild Foundation, obviously, and also to our sponsor, Capital Fund Screenplay Competition. We do have 2 free entries to give away to that competition. So if you go on Twitter and you tweet something about the event that you learned or something that you liked that our panelists talked about, tweet that. Make sure you include at Network ISA. And we're going to choose some winners. If for some reason you don't have Twitter, you don't want to, you can always email Molly at networkisa.org with your info, and she will include you in the drawing. Okay, up next, we have in our announcements an upcoming event, which is amazing. John Truby is doing a How to Write for Television with John Truby on May 24th. That is going to be an amazing event. He is such a great teacher, human being. Make sure you check that one out. And also our table read my screenplay competition is open, and we have just locked in our director for that, which is Mr. Paul Lindsay. I also wanted to bring your attention to the ISA's Pro Tips page. There, on that page, you will find a Writers Guild Foundation channel that is dedicated to their Inside the Writers Room series. These videos include panel discussions from the writers for shows including Abbott Elementary, Lost, Family Guy, New Girl, The Handmaid's Tale, and more. And new videos are posted each week. So go check out our Pro Tips page for that. All right, let's get to it. Again, we are here for Path to Getting Staffed with the Writers Guild Foundation. And I will introduce our amazing panelists who are joining us. First up, we have Clay LaPerry, rhymes with Mary, which is his daughter's name, which I learned. Easy. He is a longtime script coordinator, writer's assistant with credits including Community, WandaVision, and the iCarly reboot. Next up, we have Debbie Easer, and I hope I said the last name correctly. Perfect. She is a writer who has also worked as a script coordinator and the writer's assistant in television, on network and cable dramas, as well as single and multi-camera comedies. It says in her bio, she's a recovering attorney, former SAT math instructor, and retired improv comedy performer who always endeavors to present the material in an organized, efficient, and hopefully entertaining fashion. That is a lot of different lives that you have led in, it looks like, a short amount of time. And next up, we have Yusuf Nash. Yusuf is a son of Iraqi immigrants, an Air Force veteran, and a huge self-proclaimed nerd. I didn't say it, he did. He received an MFA in TV writing and screenwriting from Stevens College, completed the Writers Guild Foundation Veterans Writing Project, which he still volunteers for, and the Writers Access Support Staff Training Program, which we are highlighting tonight. He's held multiple internships, was a writer's PA on Legacies, a script coordinator on True Lies, and now he's a writer's assistant on The Greatest, a Muhammad Ali series on Amazon. And he typically writes about his military experience through the sci-fi and fantasy genres, or about nerds who are suffering from the normalities of life. So he writes about my life, about me suffering in my daily endeavors. How are you all?
Excellent.
Great.
Good. Thank you so much for being here. I want to go around to each one of you and just talk to you a little bit about, beyond what we've said in your resume, a little bit about your origin story, how you, not how you got your superpowers, but how you sort of found your way into the entertainment industry, how you decided that storytelling was the path that you wanted to take, anything in that region. So Clay, let's start with you.
Okay, I'll try not to drone on. I, like many of us, was a fan of television at a very young age. was very. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and was very
Mm.
fortunate to go to a high school that had a television program. We had a live TV studio. We had a live TV show. So I sort of caught the bug there, and then I decided I was going to go to Emerson College in Boston. Uh, went there and graduated in 2001. When I went into college, I thought I wanted to edit, and when I came
Mm.
out of college, I had determined I wanted to write. So I made that pivot somewhere in those 4 years. I'd like to take a moment real quick to say that in no way does anyone have to go to school for this. So I always like to say that, I did it, but no one has ever asked if I have a college degree, let alone where I went to college. So, release yourself from any of that stress. But anyway, so I moved out to LA in 2001, looking to write in sitcoms. That was my goal. It took me about 3 months to get my first PA gig. It was a show called The Jamie Kennedy Experiment, which was a hidden camera.
Mm.
That went 3 seasons. And by the 3rd season, I got bumped up. I had climbed up to writer's assistant. And then the show got canceled. And then I landed on another show called Eve on UPN as the writer's assistant on season 2. I got bumped up to script coordinator for season 3. I got my first script there. So that was I wrote my first episode of television around 2005 and felt really good about my chances of getting staffed on the 4th season of Eve. Unfortunately, UPN and WB merged. And overnight, it became the CW, the show disappeared, and I found myself back at looking for script coordinator work. And that basically began, or from there, I spent many, 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 many years bouncing from sitcom to sitcom, single camera to multi-camera, great show to terrible show, kids show to adult comedy, never getting staffed. Getting to write samples, getting to write freelance episodes on many of the shows along the way. But it was almost 20 years later that I actually finally got staffed on a show. My journey was stupidly long, unnecessarily long, but ultimately finally got that carrot that I had been chasing, and I got real dark along the way many times. But I was eventually I got staffed on the iCarly reboot, and then from there I did a season of an upcoming Marvel show called Wonder Man, which they're shooting now. And that brings me here. And then along the way, I started teaching this class with Debbie, and together we teach the Writers Access Support Staff Training Program.
Amazing. We will get back. I have a couple questions about your path, but we will get back to that after intros. Debbie, let's go to you. Let's find out your origin story.
So I grew up in New England, in Connecticut. And from a really young age, I was writing stories to the point where, like when I was 6, the birthday present that I got from my Nana was a plastic typewriter, because that's who I've always been, is, drawing, typing out the words and drawing the pictures. And so I've just been someone who loved telling stories from jump. And the way that manifested as I progressed through my education was one of my majors in college was history, because that to me is another form of storytelling. I also wear a big old nerd hat, so take everything I say knowing that. I like school a whole lot. And from there, I actually took a year between, I applied to law school. I don't have, my parents are not lawyers or anything. I saw law as another form of storytelling, persuasive storytelling. But I wanted to take a little time, a whole big year between college and law school, because law school's a lot and it costs a lot, and I wanted to get the most out of it. So I actually had taken a screenwriting seminar my last semester of college, because at the time my school didn't have a film program, and fell in love with the format. That was it for me. Through a series of lucky breaks, had connection through an organization I was part of at school. I got a chance to pitch for an episode of television on a show, and long story short, I ended up getting a story credit on an episode of TV, but still really was interested in law, and so spent my year out here. went to law school in Chicago, but never really shook that bug. So back I came to Los Angeles to practice law, knowing somewhere in the back here that like I hadn't, lost the television bug. Like Clay, I love movies too. But I love writing TV because you get to spend a whole season with these characters and take them on journeys. And yeah, so after a couple of years of practicing and paying off some debt, I took the leap because I was a litigator, and I'm sure you can already tell by my personality, I'm someone who just gets it. No, I was a litigator who hated to fight. So I was not well suited for the profession of law, though I still do love the law. And yeah, so when you start over, you got to start over at the bottom. You don't just get to lateral your way in. So I have since had a career in television. I started off, was fortunate enough to get a showrunner's assistant position, did that on a couple shows. I was a writer's assistant. And worked as a script coordinator on many shows, mostly dramas. I've done a couple comedies, single cam and multicam, done a bunch of dramedies as well. So Clay and I are a very good balance of our experience. So, and now I will pass it back to you and Yusuf.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I have a couple follow-up questions for you as well. Yusuf, let's talk to you about your path to where we are today.
Oh boy, this is tough. How do I follow that? Well, I mentioned my parents are from Iraq, and they, like many immigrants, they came out here, seeking better lives for themselves and their future family. They lived in like the height of Saddam Hussein's power. My dad eventually got 3 PhDs. My mom got her 1 PhD. But growing up, they would always tell me like how life was like before and after, Saddam Hussein, and they would always tell me stories, and always, Iraq always seemed like this oasis to me that I could never reach, like this fictional magical land. Um, but like also, growing up, I just kind of got absorbed into different forms of storytelling, from like novels, comics, games. I was really into that, and it was a path I wanted to go to from the very beginning. In fact, me and my brother would write fan fiction comics for like Sonic the Hedgehog, so we would do that when we were younger. So we had the writing bug since we were young, and so but I still felt like, oh, I adapt to the country, so I decided to join the United States Air Force. I went through. I grew up in Las Vegas, and I went to the University of Never Leave Vegas, UNLV, because that's our curse. And so went through there, went through the RTC program, became an officer for the United States Air Force. And after I left, I just like realized like, oh, well, what should I do? Oh, I like writing. Let me see how I could get into the whole writing thing. And that's where I discovered the Veterans Writing Project. And I went through there, and I was taught by actual guild members. Like some of my mentors were like Kira Snyder from, Handmaid's Tale, and, Marlena Hope of Grey's Anatomy. So it's like I was taught by these people how to write. And then, I met Kinlan Zepnik, who, was the director of the Stevens College MFA program at the time. So he was like, oh, he told me about the MFA. I was like, oh, this is a great next step to help me continue and find my voice. And plus, I had the GI Bill, so I was like, might as well go to college for free. And the GI Bill also pays you to go to college. So it's like, oh, this is nice thing. But that's how I gained my internships. I got internships in Hive Mind and Ariara and Berlanti Productions. And through those connections through there is what led me to get my writer's PA gig at Legacies. And and the funny thing is my connections there is how I got my script coordinator job at True Lies, and through my connection True Lies is how I got my current writer's assistant job here. But obviously none of this would have happened if Clay and Debbie, who were amazing teachers and really taught me like how to be a script coordinator and how to be a writer's assistant, which gave me the confidence. So like during my interviews, I would just talk about like, oh, this is all the stuff I learned. And they, very, very impressed and, hired me on the spot. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So I have a question for you, but I'm going to jump over to Clay really quick, just before I sort of get into job descriptions and what jobs do. Clay, you mentioned when you were talking that it took you basically around 20 years to kind of like make that leap. Looking back, do you have an idea of why that was so difficult to get to that next step? Or was it just kind of like, how were you getting your jobs? And then like, why weren't you making that leap? Was there something that was blocking you, or just luck?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it was luck and bad timing. Some showrunners would tell me that they, if we got another season, they would staff me, and then we would not get another season. Or sometimes I'd land on a show with a showrunner who had no intention of promoting anybody of the support staff. A couple of the reasons. So on the Jamie Kennedy experiment, I learned what I later realized was kind of a bad lesson, which was that becoming a writer's assistant or script coordinator is a guaranteed path to getting staffed, because from every season to the next, they promoted the script coordinator to staff. So on my third season, when I was finally in the writer's office, I was like, oh, here we go. I'm going to get staffed. I'm going to be 23, 24, and I'm going to get staffed. This is how you do it. It didn't happen because the show got canceled, and then it continued to not happen for a million other reasons. And I just kept digging my heels in, thinking, well, this is the way to do it. So this is going to happen. And then eventually, years and years go by and you realize, oh, this is just one way that you can make it the transition. The reason I got so many jobs is because I became so good at the job as script coordinator that people would call me. I got to a point pretty quick where I never had to go looking for jobs. The jobs would come to me. And they'd usually sometimes offer a script, and they'd say, hey, come on the show. We'll give you a script. And if we get another season, we'll staff you. And so they just keep dangling these carrots.
Right.
So you just get stuck. And then after a while, you're like, I don't know if I'm capable of doing anything else. So I'm afraid.
Right. And you're so good at that job that they want to keep you at that job.
Yes, that's a big part of it also.
Yeah. And then what was the thing that actually you feel like got you that jump? What happened in that situation where you actually okay?
You know what I think it was? Female showrunner. In 20 years, I've worked with 3 female showrunners. I've done so many shows, worked for so many men who either said they would help and didn't or couldn't. And the first woman showrunner I worked for gave me my first freelance. The second was years and years later on WandaVision. Jack Schaefer, who, while I didn't get to write a script, really embraced me as a creative asset, and I got to pitch a ton on that show. And she, in every press where she would talk about the writing staff, she always mentioned me in an equal capacity, which was incredible. And then Ali Schouten on iCarly was the woman who said, listen, you've written a freelance on this first season. I want to help and promote. And I really can point to female showrunners.
Wow. I'm glad I asked that question. That's very interesting. Yeah. Debbie, I wanted to ask you about your background in law. Do you think that that is something that, we talk a lot about, as writers, having a life outside of your writing and have a life so that you have something to talk about. Has that background and all the other stuff that you've done, has that helped you in terms of getting jobs and moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. Whether a show is a law show or just a show, a drama, just a drama about, something else, whether it be procedural or not, there are so many aspects of law that weave into life that I know that, I am often an asset in ways people never expected, because I come with this background. And I have worked on a couple different law shows. But, even, I've worked on some medical shows as well. I neglected to mention in my earlier introduction that I actually haven't, I have also gotten to write a few freelances. And most recently, I got to co-write and then solo write on The Good Doctor. And in that show, there's a lot of law that intersects with what's happening, not a lot, but like enough that certainly the background is useful. And also research skills aren't exclusive to being a lawyer, but certainly I have a particular, set of research skills that can be very, very useful to a show, in addition to just
a particular set of skills.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, like Clay said earlier, I really don't think it much matters, if you've gone to school, where you've gone to school. I think what matters is what you bring to the table, just in terms of like your background as a person. And so that's part of my background. And I think people do see it as useful, but, along with, as you said earlier, I've led a few different lives so far. So
yeah,
yeah,
you have a lot of interesting elements to your life. So that I thought that was interesting. And Yusuf, to you, I wanted to ask you kind of the same question about, you have this military background. Is that something that you, when you're taking meetings or you're applying for jobs, is that something that you put forward as a way of showing that you have lived a life and you have experiences that other people don't have?
Yeah, definitely for sure. Because that my military experience always comes out of, like, every interview conversation they have. So it's like, oh, we're talking about your life. Oh yeah, I went through the military. Oh, what you did? I was a nuclear missile operator, which means I was the guy who sat on the ground waiting for the order to turn the key to launch a nuke. So that was my job, not the most glamorous job, highly stressful. Just
Yeah,
like being a script coordinator, because, and as you can see, I could lean in through that. That's um, and that's a big part of it. And a lot of times, like when I was in True Lies, we did have like some military conversations coming up. So, I would, come and bring that experience to it as well. And I was very fortunate enough because, our showrunner Matt Next, he has a support staff, be very involved with the whole creation process. He would give us writing assignments too. So if you're ever to watch a series and you see something in the background, good chance that, one of us, did that thing, so it's a very fun creative atmosphere to be part of. But yeah, that was part of it. A lot of people ask about my, cultural background as well, about my
sure.
parents, and and that's also part of it too. So I was like, everyone's always interested, saying, "Oh, an Iraqi man in the military. What can we know more about that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I could
Right,
tell you everything about it." So
right. And they have instant faith in you. If you are strong enough to sit there and not push the buttons, you can handle the writer's room. Maybe,
oh yeah,
maybe.
and I mean, yeah, I could handle all that, and I could guarantee no stories would be leaked by me. So yeah.
True, true. Okay, so let's talk about these two main roles that we're discussing today, which is the writer's assistant and the script coordinator. So Clay and Debbie, can you guys talk about what what those job titles mean, what the duties are, and then maybe go through a sort of a day in the life of each of those jobs and what it entails?
Sure. Whenever we do this, usually I talk about the writer's assistant role, and Debbie talks about the script coordinator role. So we'll start with that.
Perfect. Okay.
And remember, most of what I have to say is from the comedy world, because I've worked
Sure.
almost exclusively in comedy. So in a sitcom, uh, the writer's assistant and the script coordinator are the script department. The script coordinator is the head of the department, and the writer's assistant is the number two. The writer's assistant's main roles include note taking, extensive, long hours, extensive note taking. So typically on a show, you have, there's pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is usually somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks, where the writers are basically working to generate as much material as possible, so that when production starts, they've got like a backlog of stuff. And in the first several weeks of that, and certainly the entire stretch of that, as you're coming up with these ideas, is just brainstorming. So in a writer's room, you might have 10 writers around a table, and the writer's assistant will be the only person at a computer who's
Mm,
physically taking all the notes, collecting all the pitches, the jokes, the story ideas, the character descriptions, organizing, and the keeper of all of these ideas, who is responsible for cleaning, maintaining, and distributing at the end of every day. That's a big part of it. And then the other part, specifically in sitcoms, so much writing is done as a group in comedy. Drama is mostly individually, but in comedy, it's often room written. And when you're room writing or rewriting a script, the script is on a screen, a monitor that everyone in the room can see. And the writer's assistant is often at the computer,
mm,
physically making all the changes that are being dictated to them And so you're spending, it's very normal to work a 12-hour day. So you're 12 hours in this room brainstorming. Those are the two main tasks of a writer's assistant on a comedy. Really quickly, I know Debbie will get into the script coordinator stuff, but in the comedy world, the script coordinator shares all of those duties that I just said with the writer's assistant. You basically split those roles. And on top of that, which Debbie will get into, is the extra script coordinator duties that the script coordinator is responsible for. So Debbie, go for it.
Yep. So I'll just add that on the drama side as a writer's assistant, and I think on the comedy side, this comes up just not as much. You will end up doing a lot of research. Pretty much the support staff in a writer's office is a team, and anyone who has the time will be doing the research, but it's something that's disseminated by the writer's assistant with the room notes, that night, or to the writer whose episode needs that research, what have you. And as Clay said, in the comedy world, the duties are shared. In the drama world, the duties are very much more siloed. So the script coordinator only ends up taking notes if they're asked to fill in, or if the room splits up into two rooms and they're asked to take one of the rooms, what have you. It's not generally a part of the regular assigned duties. What the script coordinator is responsible for is, I try to shorthand it to calling it the copywriter of a show, because the script coordinator is responsible for proofreading, formatting, and distributing any material that goes out of the writer's office. And that includes something called story areas, which are 1 to 2 page documents that will just sort of give headlines of, hey, studio, hey, network, this is what we're doing for this episode. An outline, which is a much more detailed, scene by scene breakdown of what episodes will be. And then your scripts. And you start with studio or studio network drafts, and then network drafts, and various drafts, and then getting into revisions and so forth. So that's obviously a huge part of what a script coordinator does. But in addition to, and you're part of the beating heart of the writer's office. I've never worked on a show as a script coordinator where I've not been part of the writer's room, where I'm not, unless duties require otherwise, where I've not been present in the writer's room, and where I've not been, someone who has been, obviously, when I say encouraged to contribute, I don't mean that I'm stepping over and pitching onto, the actual people hired to be writers in the show, but I've always worked for showrunners who value contributions from support staff. So in addition to those duties, a script coordinator is also responsible for something called clearances. And what that means is every script goes to a research company, and that research company will create a report with every name, every character name, business name, anything referenced in a script that might be copyrightable, a movie quote, a song quote, even like something that might have a label on it. And they're going to generate a report, and, they're going to do research into, Clay LaPerry is the character in the script. Are there more than 3 Clay LaPerrys in the Los Angeles area, or 4 or 5, depending on the studio standard? And then there is a lawyer assigned to each show, and that person will have to either sign off on usage of each name or not. And if something is rejected, it's the script coordinator's job to then go back to the writer, work with them to get alternates, and so forth. Same thing, similar thing, broadcast standards and practices, even on streaming shows, like there are still things, because you have also ad sales. Sometimes they don't want you mentioning brands in dialogue. You have to make sure that those things that are flagged are changed if required. As the script coordinator, you are also dealing with a whole bunch of script paperwork, is the way I term it. This is paperwork that generally you're submitting to business affairs, because writers are paid for their job as writers in the writer's room, but they also, when they're assigned a script, that is a separate contract and script fee. And the script coordinator is responsible for processing that paperwork, making sure they get paid, along with a whole host of other paperwork. And on top of all that, the script coordinator is also the hub for different departments: production, the art department, casting, post, and the script supervisor, the first ADs, all of whom have separate, different needs that are script related that the script coordinator is in charge of handling. So it's a big job, and it requires a lot of, multitasking and detail-oriented brain work.
I mean, I don't know. It sounds very easy to me. It sounds just like super like basic.
Just
It's
to-
like, oh,
also
you
just-
got this.
To throw it out there,
Welcome.
all those things that Debbie listed, you do that in comedies as well. The difference is that the comedy scripts are 30 pages versus the drama scripts, which are 60 pages. So it's half the time of proofing.
A follow-up question, Clay, for you. When the writer's assistant collects all of that data for the day and the jokes and all the stuff, what do they do with what do they do with that? Do they compile it at night and then give it to everybody, or just keep it, or like have it as a reference for the next day if somebody asks? Like, what do you do with all of that?
The typical procedure is to send the daily notes to the entire writing staff at the end of the night, after you've had time to clean it up. The more you do the job, the better you get at cleaning up as you go. So you're not spending a lot of time after hours cleaning, but certainly in the beginning, you need that time to sort of get your legs. The reality is most writers don't read the notes. It's sort of just a thing where no one reads the notes
Right.
until they need to read the notes. And that's when, someone gets assigned the story about the rafting trip, and suddenly they come up and they say, hey, I need all the notes from on the rafting trip, and then you have to go find all those notes and send them again, even though they've already received the notes.
Right.
So you have to send it out, but it's rare that people check it every day.
Right, of course. And we're going to get into, I want to shift into talking about the program. But first I wanted to ask Yusuf, when you first started out, before you did this program, were you like, I mean, it sounds like if you're stepping into one of these roles, it's just a lot thrown at you. So I wanted to just ask you, before you did the program, I know you did the veterans program, but before you did this program that we're going to talk about, did you how did you go into that? Were you completely overwhelmed, or just because of your background of all the stuff that you've done already, were you like, what was that like before you learned a little bit more?
Like before I got into the program.
Yeah.
I mean, it was overwhelming. I mean, I don't know, because I feel like a lot of stuff about the class, what we're going to detail about the program, will like answer this question, So I don't want to give too much,
Yeah.
but like, just like going in. I mean, I had an idea of like what both positions entailed, and it's definitely like positions I really want to strive and go towards, because I still feel like as a writer I'm not that strong or sellable, but I've kind of grown tired of like working a bunch of odd jobs. Like another one of my previous jobs was being a adjunct professor at the community college in Las Vegas. So it's like, and that was a whole different life and story in it. But I kind of got tired of it. And I was like, I want to work in the actual business, because it's been years now, and I need to start working, and hopefully I could work my way up. So I was like aware about them, but going through the program really um, gave me way more details, especially with script coordinator, right? Like writer's assistants, like, oh, you just take notes and you clean things up and you can send it out to people and you just gotta keep track of things. Cool, but like script coordinator is like, I didn't know you had to do like all the extra, which sounds like an oxymoron. I didn't know you had to coordinate with all the different departments, So it's in the name, but I didn't know about that until like going through the program and getting all of our lessons and writing notes about that. I feel like script coordinator is the one that like I wrote the most notes of, because that's the ones I know about the least.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's get into talking about, and I had to look at the name again because I was like saying the program, and then I'm like, what? The Writers Guild Foundation Writers Access Support Staff Training Program. Phew. Let's talk about what exactly this training program is, and what what it entails, how it came about. Just let's talk about it. And everybody, if I don't want to see in the chat, like, is this an infomercial about the program? We're of course talking about this program because it's extremely helpful to get the knowledge that you need for these jobs that are complicated. I mean, so that's what we're doing. So I don't want any chat on there about it. Okay, so let's talk about the program. What exactly is the program? What's the mission? And just take us through it.
That's my cue, I guess.
Oh, Debbie.
So the program's goal is to open up writer's assistant and script coordinator positions to underrepresented groups. And so back in 2020, showrunners Mike Royce and Tanya Sriracho and writer Liz Alper came together with this cause because in my opinion, I will say, on ideal shows with ideal writers' rooms, they promote from within. And so your support staff is essentially your farm team. And so the way, we all want to see more representation on shows and in writing staffs. And one really good way to do that is to help diversify the ranks of the farm team, of the support staff. And that is very much, that is what this program is all about. And so this program was designed to cut through that catch-22 of, you can't get a job without the experience, but how the heck do you get the experience if no one will hire you without the experience? So the idea is you go through what, Clay and I proudly refer to as a very intensive 12 weeks of training, where you will learn every single skill you need to kick butt as a writer's assistant and a script coordinator. And it is, in my opinion, equivalent to having a season of television under your belt for real, because we give you homework and we expect you to do it. And it's the equivalent of publishing scripts. And we have, even more homework for next year, this next cycle. You're welcome, future students. So really everything that Clay and I have described that goes into the positions, we have stepped out in lessons in very interactive ways. We run 4 separate simulated writers' room exercises. So people we expect no one in the program will have ever been in a writer's room. We're going to give you that experience of being in a writer's room, both as support staff and just to give you experience of what it's like to be pitching in a room. And in addition to the skills, we teach you about all the politics that goes into these jobs, because there's a lot that you just can't know until you experience it. So Clay, jump in and tell me what I forgot.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, that's what we're doing, trying to give the people who need it, who have tried to get into this world and have not been able to, the opportunity to learn everything it takes. And we have a ton of knowledge between the two of us, decades of experience. And we're really proud. We've had a lot of success so far that we're super proud of.
Well, let's talk about the application process of this. How does somebody enter? And then because you guys are here and you're the insiders and the knowledge, are there any tips, any tricks, any insider knowledge that we can know about applying, ways to get a leg up in the application, anything that you should really think about or focus on in that application?
Sure. There's a lot of fields that you have a lot of chances to talk about who you are as a person, what your interests are in terms of writing, because we all understand that everyone who is getting into this program has the ultimate goal to one day getting staffed. I can tell you, speaking personally, because we do have a pretty large committee who reads the applications, a selection committee, and everyone sort of has their own boxes that they're checking independently. So we're not always looking for the same stuff. But I can tell you, for me, the things that I want to know that the person applying has an understanding of what the class is, that this is a class for support staff. This is not a guaranteed way to get staffed. It's not a fast track to getting staffed. It's a path to getting support staff work. So I want to hear language that they're aware of that. I also want to know what sort of efforts they have made so far into getting into this business. We'd love to give everyone everyone who just loves TV these skills, but by the nature of the class and this limited acceptance, that I want to know that you have pounded the pavement, tried to get jobs, and have been hitting walls because for any number of reasons that you're experiencing, and just show some prior efforts to getting into this world. Those are two of my big ones. Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, I just to piggyback off of that and add to the idea being you know, we want to, like, we understand that, you know, the whole point of this class is that you haven't been, like, we want to help you break through where you haven't been able to break through into a writer's office. But we want to see concrete steps that you have taken. You know, have you, you know, been, you know, taking maybe a class after work, or have you joined a group to network, or because, you know, we come across applications where, at least to me, it's clear you get someone who has, you know, maybe been focused on features or whatever and sees this as, well, maybe I'll try this. But, you know, this is about television. And so if I don't see that you're specifically focused and, you know, that this is what you're aiming for and that you've been working toward it, I'm not as inclined to, you know, rate that application as highly.
Yeah.
And yep, go ahead.
Sorry. I'll also add, I had a thought and hopefully it didn't escape my head. Oh, so there's a lot of questions in the application, or there are some questions in the application about the types of material you like to write, the types of stories you like to tell, and that's all great. We do take that into consideration, but it's less about your ability to write, your skill as a writer. It's really a bigger part of it, I think, for Debbie and I is figuring out, you know, we have a nice balance of people who want to write comedy, people who want to write drama, people who are interested in animation. Sort of, we want to have a nice spread of interests, so that once you have graduated and these hopeful job opportunities come, we never know who's going to come knocking on our door. Is it going to be an animated series? Is it going to be a serialized, or a dark comedy, or a procedural drama? It's nice to be able to find the right candidates for the right job and to have a nice selection of voices and styles.
Okay. And I'm going to fire some questions. Okay. So there's a question of, do you have to live in LA?
Good question. You do not have to live in LA. However, we are limiting the number of non-LA class members to, I think, about 10%, because the goal here is to get people jobs. And a big, you know, the hard reality is, if you don't live in Los Angeles, you're going to have a lot harder time getting work. Now, obviously, people in New York, people in Atlanta sometimes have opportunities, but most writers' rooms, you know, productions are all over, but most of the writers' rooms are in LA. So we just don't want to have 20 great candidates who can do the job but can't get to the job.
Right. And then next, do you guys notice repeat applicants? So if somebody applies, say last year, and they didn't get it, do you encourage them to keep applying and keep honing their skills, because you will notice?
Absolutely. You know, you've had a whole other year where, you know, I assume if this is your dream and your goal, that you've been working toward it, and, you know, show us that. And we definitely encourage people to keep applying. I believe last year's cycle had someone who had applied the first year and not gotten in.
At least one, for sure.
Yeah.
It will not hurt you in any way.
That's awesome. And then how many people are accepted, and is it just one time a year, or do you do it twice?
So this year, I think we're just doing it once. We are just doing it once. We are the first class that we taught so when we first did it, when we first launched applications for our first 2 semesters that we filled up at the same time, we took 48 people, 2 classes of 24 people. We got 2,200 applications that first year, and we had to narrow it down to 48 people. Afterwards, Debbie and I sort of talked. We like, how can we improve the class? And one of the ways was a smaller class size. So the third class of people we had 16 people. We had 1,100 applications, and we took 16 people. They're not exactly sure on the total number this year, but it's not going to exceed 16.
Okay. And then is there a deadline? I see the link is up for this, but do you guys know if there's a deadline? Is it coming up, or do you have a little bit of time, or?
You definitely have some time. Do you know the deadline off the top of your head, Debbie? I want to say it's May.
It's May something. I'm sorry. I should know this.
Okay.
It's May 18th.
Go to the link.
May 18th.
May 18th.
Amazing. Okay.
And,
Perfect.
and I just wanted to give a
Yep.
shout out. I saw in the chat. I didn't know Renee was here. Renee Ross, who was in our cycle last year, she was someone who she said I applied the first year, didn't get in, but got in last year. So, like she said, do not give up.
That's amazing. Hello, Renee. Thank you for joining us. Okay, Yusuf, I want to ask you about your experience going through the program. Can you talk about your application process? Was it easy? Did you think I'm gonna totally get in it, or were you like, I'm gonna fill this out and then can you talk about your experience in the program?
Yeah. So I rewrote my essay 7 times. Like I really wanted to get in this program, and we all got so bad. And I, rewrote it a couple times myself, shared it with some friends, shared it with some mentors, getting feedback from all around, and you know, just and just learning from that. So like I was like very serious, and as we all know, writing is rewriting, right? So that's how bad I really wanted to get in. And, obviously I'd start off with like, telling a story, that was the advice I gave. Like, don't write it like it's a typical cover letter that you're applying to some, business or job here in a year. You want to show that you want to be a writer, but also at the same time, it's like you really want to be a writer's assistant or a script coordinator, like, for myself, it's just because I have these kind of backgrounds, being in the military and all these other things, like I feel like I'll be great as a support staff because I'm still trying to find my voice. I'm not that great of a writer, but I really want to help bring my experience to the room. And that's how I kind of sold myself in those essays. Um, and plus talk about my previous experience, like I've been volunteering with the Veterans Writing Project. So that, I think there's a question like, oh, have you interacted with other writers? How do you do through stuff? How did you work your way through that? So I talked about my experience through there. So much to Debbie and Clay's point, I feel like I only got in because I had experience that really showcased that I can be an ideal candidate. Not so much like going through the program, but like after the program, I can like excel past the program as well. Um, and just going through the program, it's like a fun classroom. We spend a lot of time just like learning and practicing. I'm a hands-on learner, so we did a lot of hands-on stuff, which is great, fantastic, and learning about that. And then once we got to the script coordinating stuff, it was, I was all over it. So I became the master of the scene numbers. How do we learn from like when do we use like letters, scenes, and stuff like that. We have a Slack channel, and I tend to be like the guy that like instantly when someone asks a question, how do we do this? Like, I'm in it because I've memorized that shit. Um, so, and of course the color pages as well. So, and I'm very envious of all the later classes have getting like so much homework assignments because we didn't get much. Like a lot of our homework assignments was like in class assignments, so we just Debbie and Clay will like send us like a script. It's like, okay, let's look over it. We're gonna go over it on the class. We just send again and in it to everyone early, and but it's like, oh man, I wish we had more time to like throughout the week just to like practice and learn more and be more prepared for the next class and the other classes. So, but we also got like some guests, coming in, some showrunners coming in and telling us like what they expected out of support staff, what they want more out of us as we're able to graduate from the program.
And then what happened when you graduated from the program? Was there is and Clay and Debbie, you can jump into about this. What happens after the program? Do your I forget what am I going to call these people? Do the people in the class
Labs.
get yeah, graduates? Do they get what happens to them once they're finished?
Yusuf, why don't you talk about your experience, and then Clay and I can give our perspective.
Yeah, so I like literally became a writer's PA. I can't remember, it was either like near the end or the middle of going through the program.
Mm,
But afterwards it was just like, oh well, what do I do? Well, I'm in this writer's PA role, and hey, the writer assistant got assigned an episode, so she can't take notes. So I had to chop in and like, hey, I just went through this program. I could fill in
mm.
for her when she can't do it, around my other writer's PA duties as well. And at the same time, I talked with the script coordinator and just saying like, hey, I learned this and this, so, how do you do stuff? And script coordinator Helen, she really showed me like, oh, this is what I do, this is how my process. Oh, what about X, Y, and Z? I was like, oh, it's kind of. So I really showed like how I really try to impress people in my room that like, oh, this is all stuff I learned in the program. I could be a good candidate to like get promoted if we were to get a second season. Unfortunately, that it got canceled, so that was unfortunate. But I feel like just since I earned a good rapport with the writers, they're the ones who referred me to other people. So
Mm,
so I didn't really get a job, right out graduating from the program. I did the whole like connecting with people, and they sent me to their connections, and those connections sent me to their other connections. So as pretty much a lot of us know, like Hollywood is all about like who you know. And I played the whole, and I was just fortunate enough that somebody knew somebody who's looking for somebody at the time. So and once I got into those interviews, like I said earlier, I just like talked about all the stuff I've learned and all my resources that I have, and that's how definitely helped me, got me my jobs that I am working on today.
excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, what we do is after the graduates finish the class, we work with Kira at the WGF and
Hmm.
Mike and Tanya and Liz to put out a big blast to all of our industry contacts and saying, hey, we've got 16 great new candidates who are ready and capable to start working. Please inquire if you're a showrunner who's looking to hire support staff. We get a ton of we have gotten so far a bunch of interest. Usually the when we do a blast, we get a lot of interest that follows. People just saying, hey, we'd like a link to the lookbook, which has everyone's resumes and bios and stuff. And then a percentage of those people actually come back and say, okay, I'm actually serious and capable and able to interview and meet some of your candidates. And so then Debbie and I ask about, what type of show is it? What is it about? How many episodes, whatever. And then together, she and I go through our roster of, and not just the most recent class, all the other previous graduates as well,
Mm.
find the best candidates and submit, maybe 3 names. We try not to overload the submission process. And then hopefully someone gets some of those, or all of them get interviews, and hopefully some get hired. We have had 60 people come through the program. A small percentage of those people come out of the program and are like, you know what, this is not for me. I don't want to do this job.
Right.
It's not a lot, but it certainly is. It happens. And of the 60 people who graduated, we've gotten over 20 people jobs. Close to 22 people, I think, at this point, who have gotten actual support staff gigs on TV shows. That's a third of our graduates that we've gotten placed, and we continue to push all of the other 40 people whenever we have an opportunity.
That's amazing. Debbie, did you want to add to that, or are we?
I mean,
Good.
just again, just piggybacking to say that, Clay and I have as do the founders of the program, have our own, contacts within the industry. But I'm also completely shameless when, because even just hearing about these jobs, you have to sort of be plugged in to different Google groups, or I'm not on Facebook, but anytime I hear about a job, I will introduce myself to a stranger via email and say, CC Clay and say, hi, have you heard about our program? Would you be willing to consider a couple of our grads as candidates? And I'm very pleased to say that we've had a number of people hired that way. I will just, I am able to be completely shameless when it comes to advocating for grads. Less so for myself, but I'm working on that. So
Right.
It's a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I kind of made it sound like we just wait for people to come to us, but we definitely don't. We are also trying to pound the pavement. And if I ever have an opportunity where I go on a general with someone at a studio, I always try by the end of my conversation to plug the program and to say, hey, if you have shows that are staffing up and you're looking for a specific type of voices, please consider the program. So Debbie and I are working tirelessly. I mean that for our graduates.
You're looking tired.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys sound like the most ideal instructors, honestly, of just coming from pure love and,
Yes,
care.
they're
for people.
absolutely great, and they're very quick in answering questions too. Like I'm pretty sure they'll get 100 questions from like all the students, and they are just on it all the time. So they're absolutely fantastic people. You can't ask for better teachers. I learned so much from them, and I still refer to my notes all the time. Debbie is an amazing PowerPointer, so her PowerPoint presentations never left my desktop. So they're definitely great
Oh,
resources to have.
Thank you, Yusuf.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to some of the questions that Scott has pulled from the chat. So if you guys put a question in the chat, he probably pulled it over. If you have questions right now, throw them in the chat so that we can kind of pull them over while we just talk about this last topic. Will you all talk about this possible writer's strike? And just to keep it positive, I guess, what do you think is the best way to utilize your time or resources during this strike? If it happens, or hopefully it gets resolved quickly, but let's say it does happen. What do you think is the best way for writers to utilize their time or support staff? What should we be doing?
Okay, so yeah, definitely the elephant in the room. Yeah, so in the event of strike or not, I can say with complete confidence that the possibility of a strike has unfortunately slowed everything down, at least on the writer's office side of things. The number of shows being greenlit to series has slowed to a very quiet drip. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that, there are very few opportunities, unfortunately, right now. And so I'll just talk about the hope is that strike or no strike, that, hopefully this contract will be resolved very soon. And if there's a strike, who knows how long it will take. My expectation, and Clay and I have talked about this, and I think he shares this view, is that once it is resolved, we expect to see kind of a flurry of shows getting going. And so we hope to see that there will be a lot of jobs. And we think that will coincide nicely. A pickup of activity will coincide nicely with this next cohort being ready to rock in writers' rooms, as well as, our grads from previous cycles. So we are hopeful that pattern will be followed. In terms of my advice personally about the best way to ride out a writer's strike, always write when you can. Obviously, finding if you're someone who gets laid off as a result of the strike, finding whatever other work that you can. I know personally, back in 2017, when it looked like there might be a strike, it was the same kind of crickets that there are now. And I had a very hard time. I didn't find a job on a show until after the contract was resolved. And in the meantime, I was picking up, side gigs. I did some dog walking for WAG because I'm a dog lover. Whatever you can do to stay afloat. It can be a scary time, and I definitely want to acknowledge that. And if you're in Los Angeles, I would recommend, if you want to show solidarity with the writers, if there is a strike, join them on the picket line. It's a great way to network. And true. Clay, what do you have to add?
Very little, but I think all of us should be making it a goal to hopefully come out of this strike with one new sample. That's what my goal is, to hopefully come away with one more sample. But yeah, I mean, it's tight. It's tight for us. It's going to be. Debbie and I both went through the 2007 strike, which was 100 days, and that was hard.
Right. Trying to keep it positive. So just start writing, get some samples. And join the strikers, join the picketers. Get out there and support. Okay, so let's move over to these questions that were pulled for us. There are a few, so I'm going to try to go through and just pick a couple that I feel kind of stick to topic. We already did the strike one. Okay. Maya's asking, you guys mentioned writing freelance episodes, not as a staff writer. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how that works?
Sure. Debbie's probably going to know the specifics better than I am, but most shows are, depending on the episode order, required to give 1 or 2 freelance scripts to someone outside of the writing staff. Ideally, if you're a script coordinator or a writer's assistant, you're considered, your hat's in the ring there. Sometimes they'll go to writers who aren't currently working, who are friends with the showrunner or who have some connection. But I always try to angle for a script when I was script coordinator. In comedies, scripts typically go to script coordinator before they go to a writer's assistant. It's not always the case in the drama world, but that is pretty standard in the comedy world. Yeah, you typically, depending on where the script is assigned in the season, which is usually if you're going to get a freelance as a support staff, it's usually closer to the end of the season. Sometimes it's the finale or the penultimate episode. And ideally, you get a week to sort of step away from your script coordinator duties to get a first draft done, but that's not always the case. I've certainly written freelance scripts after hours because I was not given the opportunity to do it during the work hours. And then, that can be, sometimes you get the story and teleplay where you get the whole script. Sometimes you are able to pitch a story idea and you get the story, but you don't, you should maybe share the credit with another writer. There's a lot of different shapes it can take to get your freelance. And one occasion, they had to give away a freelance script to a support staff. The script was already written and they just put my name on it. I didn't write a word. And I was lucky enough to get that script payment and the residuals for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it's there's a million different ways for it to happen, but it's a nice chunk of change too if you're lucky enough to get one.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, just about the requirement for a freelance. It's written into the WGA's contract, the contract with the studios, and it varies depending on the type of show, the episode order, and the season. So like a successful network show that has, 20, 22 episodes, that's in its second, third, what have you season, typically has a freelance requirement to give at least 2 freelance episodes. And that means, like I said, writers who are not on the writing staff. The unfortunate thing is not every show adheres to those requirements. And they rely upon the Writers Guild being able to enforce that. And, otherwise, or sometimes shows will just pay a penalty because, some showrunners, unfortunately, don't have the attitude of, wanting to give the opportunity to support staff. So ideally, it's something that you suss out in an interview for one of these positions about how open showrunners are to people earning, and I always phrase it as earning your opportunity to a freelance, by, showing your commitment to the show and your contributions and so forth.
Right. Great. So I'm going to move on to Don's question. Wondering if it's worth applying if you aren't in LA yet, but you plan to move out in the next year. Also, if you're in grad school, should you wait until you're done with school?
I think if you have real true plans to move to LA, like you think that's in motion, absolutely say that in your application. Definitely apply, make it clear that this is, you don't live in LA yet, but by X amount of time, by this month or whatever, you plan on being there. That's great. That will count as an LA. I don't think that would count as a outside of an LA person.
Yeah.
And then in terms of grad school, David, what do you think? What are your thoughts about that?
My thought is wait until you're out, because you want to be available for full-time work as soon as you're through this program. So, and you're in grad school, for a very good reason. Like you're studying something very cool and gaining skills. So this program is not going anywhere. I would advise waiting until you are done and available for full-time work.
Yeah, much to the point, because I'm sure Debbie and Clay know sometimes like you'll get hired and they'll be like, okay, great, can you start tomorrow? Like, and that's like kind of the point of living in LA. Like, when I got my PA job, it was like, hey, we want you to start tomorrow, but you had to take this COVID test, so you have to wait 3 days, because of the rules. So it's like, a lot of places like really want you right away. My current job, they say, oh, like I had more rooms, like, oh, come in like, next week. So it's a very quick turnaround. They don't let, it's not like a normal place where it's like, oh, you got hired, you could start in a month from now. It's like, no, they want you like now.
That's really good on this.
Yeah, that's true. What just overall advice, I'm just going to kind of paraphrase a couple of the questions. What advice do you have for emerging writers who would like to be staffed, would like to work in television, but maybe don't make it into the program. Do you have any just advice in general for like starting out in the industry of what you can do? Is it about networking? Is it about having a large amount of samples? What's some good advice to help these writers?
I'll go first. I can. So listen, as someone who took 20 years to get staffed, I clearly did not have the answer to that. If I did, I would have done it sooner. But I can tell you, I spent many nights thinking, I should have just done improv. I should have at some point stopped this madness and tried UCB or because I wanted to write comedy, and I think that that's a great way to sharpen your craft in terms of comedy writing. If you do that, I think it's a great way for networking. I think networking is the answer. I think samples are also the other answer. And that's, so much of it beyond that is luck and timing.
Right.
And I would just add that, more specifically when it comes to networking, my attitude has always been like, we rise together. The people that I have gotten to know in this journey, the more that we all help each other, the better off we all are. So I have made it a point since, I waved my hands when Clay talked about improv, because I went through the Groundling School, not because I had a dream of being on SNL, but because I love making people laugh. And it was, I started it when I was still practicing law. It was such a good outlet. And I met so many fun people who I'm still friends with, a bunch of them to this day. And they're doing different things in the industry. And it's great. Like, and I have friends who went off and became went the agent route. And, none of them stuck through to become agents, but getting to know people who are working on that side of things, you're all going to bring different knowledge and experience and connections to the table, and you can help each other. And that's what it's about, as well as people working on the studios and development side of things. Find your people. This is definitely a hard city to do that. I moved here knowing one person. But if you stick to it and put yourself out there, I'm naturally a shy person. It's not my comfort zone. But you will find it, and join a writer's group, do all these things.
I'm sorry. I also want to make it clear that I know that I have, I don't want it to give the impression that the support staff route is not a viable route, because I've seen so many people come up below me and continue on to getting staffed in lightning speed over the course of a year or 2 seasons. It happens. We've had 2 graduates get support staff jobs and already have been staffed. So this is also a viable route, even though for me personally, for Debbie and I, it was longer routes or longer paths. It's not always that. But you need to know that that's a possibility before you get too deep.
Yusuf, what's your advice for newbie or emerging writers?
I have this poster. I'm a fan of this YouTube channel called Extra Credits. They talk about games and stuff. And I got this poster that I hang over my head. And it says, "Fail faster. No idea is fully formed. Your ideas can't be precious. Your ego can't need protecting. Every failure is a chance to get it right." So yeah, you did not make it to this program. You didn't make it to other programs, but there's always other routes you can take. So every script you write can lead to another rewrite. Continue focusing on your craft, because I feel like the moment you stop, that's it. So that's it. You're done. And it's hard. It's gonna be grueling. You're gonna hate your writing. You're gonna be upset that other people aren't making the connections you thought you're going to be making, but you just got to keep going at it, because if you really want to tell your stories, if you really want to get your voice out there, you really got to keep on moving and keep on going, and your time will eventually come. So that's my advice. I'm 34
awesome.
And I'm gonna be 35. I'm gonna be 35 next month, and I'm a support staff, so if you think age is going to be a thing, don't discount it too much. So yeah,
I love that, because there were a couple questions about age. Do you, what about the over 40 writers, or the writers who are in their 30s, or so yeah, I think that's some great advice. Just keep going.
I would just want to add on the age thing. ageism is a real thing in Hollywood. Like, I'm not going to pretend that it's not. And as a female sitting here on this panel, I can tell you, I won't like talk about my age ever. And I will occasionally watch my cultural references when I'm in a writer's room, because it is a real thing. So is it a thing? Yes. Is it a thing with everyone? Absolutely not. But I mean, just as there are obstacles for every group, but you know, I do want to acknowledge that, like, yeah, it is a thing still in Hollywood, unfortunately. Not to be a downer, even though my name is Debbie.
I was just gonna say that. I'm like, oh, okay. I was gonna end on Yusuf's super amazing, upbeat comment. Yusuf, I love that you came in. I just want you to read. You just look up and read that thing one more time on the ceiling, because I love it.
Fail faster. No idea is made fully formed. Your ideas can't be precious. Your ego can't need protecting. Every failure is a chance to get it right.
I love that. I think that is how we were going to end this conversation. Make sure you guys go to the link and fill out the application. Go for it. I mean, I can't imagine a better program, honestly, if this is the path that you want to take, honestly, and you have the best instructors. So apply, do it. You're out there. And that is all for tonight. So everybody have a good evening, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.